WWE this week announced the launch of its new Independent Wrestler Development Program, or the WWE ID program, as they're calling it. They already have their Next in Line program to recruit college athletes. They started that in 2021. Gable Steveson was their first NIL signee. That didn't work out too well. But Obafemi was part of their first NIL class, and he's turned into one of their biggest prospects. This is like a companion program to that, but for independent wrestlers. They're not partnering with indie promotions, which is an important distinction to make that I think a lot of people have either overlooked or I don't know if they're just not aware of the fact that this is not tied into indie promotions per se, but with select training schools and individual wrestlers themselves. The point is to establish a pathway for them to one day join WWE. Doesn't mean they will, but they kind of get first dibs, and maybe one day they'll end up working for the company. In a press release, they said, under the program, WWE will provide prominent independent wrestling schools with the WWE ID official designation, with the goal of providing new trainees and existing talent at these select institutions with enhanced developmental opportunities. Booker T's Reality of Wrestling out of Houston, Cody Rhodes' Nightmare Factory out of Atlanta, Seth Rollins' Black and Brave Academy out of Davenport, Iowa, Elite Pro Wrestling Training Center out of Concord, New Hampshire, and Knock X Pro Academy out of Los Angeles, which is Rikishi's school, are the first WWE ID independent wrestling schools to earn the official designation. Additionally, WWE ID will identify top independent wrestling prospects with an official prospect designation and support their developmental journey by providing financial opportunity and assisting with training, mentorship, and development, including access to world-class facilities, best-in-class ring training, athletic trainers, and more. WWE ID will give fans the opportunity to follow the paths of these standout prospects on the independent wrestling scene through curated behind-the-scenes content, as well as highlights and matches showcased across WWE's social platforms. So what is this, breaking this down, what does this mean for WWE? What does this mean for these schools? What does this mean for the independent scene? For WWE, they get first crack at top prospects. That's really what it boils down to. And for the schools, it's a great deal because they get the WWE seal of approval, which makes them more attractive to prospective students. And for the ones that run their own shows, they're going to have access to NXT talent that WWE may send for more seasoning. They've scaled back a lot on house shows. I'm not just talking main roster, but NXT. Someone like a Sol Ruka, for example, and I checked on this. She has not wrestled on an NXT live event since the end of August. Lola Vice, September 20th. Javon Evans, September 27th. They're not running as many shows as they should. You cannot replicate working in front of a crowd by just working matches at the PC. And they're only going to scale back on these live events even further in 2025. So that's one of the benefits, is that you can have some of these people that you sort of loan out to. I know Booker T, for example, Reality of Wrestling, they run their own shows. I don't know that Seth Rollins' Academy does, but I know Booker T's does. And Booker T has had NXT talent come out to ROW before. But in some of these cases, if they're not getting enough reps, let's say at the live events down in Florida, wherever NXT is running these shows typically, it could be beneficial to them to go down to Houston and work a show at, an ROW event. So there's benefits in that respect, I think, that go both ways. Per PW Insider, former Ring of Honor and Evolve booker Gabe Sapolsky will be among the names overseeing the program. If the PC is the finishing school, quote unquote, the idea is to have WWE ID accredited schools be places where beginners can go and where independent talents who have potential can be pointed to train at for continued improvement. Where there may be some ripple effect on the independent scene could be talents that want to get in or stay in WWE's good graces, focusing on doing only what would be best for them to get funneled through the WWE system. That could lead to a change in how some talents direct their path in the business, the same way that the opening of OVW and FCW led to talents rushing to move to Kentucky or Florida, hoping that by being geographically close to those then WWE developmental systems, they would have an in. If talents are primarily concerned about getting in, they're going to do whatever they believe would be best in WWE's eyes, and that will change how they pursue pro wrestling. A few independent promoters we spoke with have already worried that this could be the American equivalent of WWE signing all of the British talents ahead of the launch of NXT UK, where talents will have issues doing jobs or even end up pulled from dates at WWE's behest. But whether those fears are correctly founded remains to be seen. It is too early to tell, but there is no doubt that this could tip the scales in what indie wrestlers will want to achieve and aim for right out of the gate in their careers and how and where they decide to work. That could also be a downside, because if all of these talents are being taught to achieve what WWE wants, that could break down the uniqueness that pervades the independent scene. The only thing I would push back on there, as you know, you look around at the independent scene, is there really a lot of uniqueness anymore? It just seems to me like across wrestling in general, let alone the independent scene, there isn't a whole lot of uniqueness anymore. I mean, the last really unique sort of presentation of wrestling that I could think of that I personally enjoyed, and this is not indie per se, but Lucha Underground. Lucha Underground was such a different, unique, creative take on what wrestling could be. And I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the sort of cinematic nature of how a lot of the segments were filmed. Really, the whole show, how the whole show was filmed. And yeah, they went over the top, and it was, you know, very cartoony with some of the gimmicks, and people were killed off and stuff like that. And that could be a turnoff because in some people's eyes, that's not what wrestling should be, right? But it was a unique enough twist on wrestling, and they had the right talent for it and the right performers that I really was very disappointed and very sad when Lucha Underground just sort of fizzled out and never even got a proper ending. But I look at wrestling today, and I look at all these promotions and even the independent scene, and you try to be creative in the way that you present wrestling. You know, we try to do that with House of Glory even. You know, we specifically try to borrow from that Lucha Underground mentality with some of the vignettes. We have great, very talented people, audio, video people who help film some of this stuff. They do a tremendous job. I've had the chance to be part of some of these segments, and you get to turn around after the fact and watch them back, and it's like, there's really nobody else right now on the independent scene, for example, doing stuff like that. And so you try to be unique in that respect. But by and large, when I really think about the entire scene, I don't know these days that there's a whole lot going on that truly I would call unique and creative in a way that we haven't seen before. And I know what Mike is getting at, you know, Mike Johnson, when he makes that comment. And it's true. I mean, this is something that could only erode that even further. But I already feel like we're in a situation where there's just not a whole lot of unique shit going on in wrestling. Everything just kind of feels the same. So personally, I already feel like we're there. We're already seeing that issue play itself out. John Pollock and Brandon Thurston, they did a podcast together this week and revealed that several indie talents are already under WWE ID deals. No names have been announced yet. I said it on Twitter right after the news broke, and we had a great discussion about this on TNT Tuesday night. The reality is, you have a lot of independent talent. I would say the majority of them, not all of them, but the majority of them who aspire to one day work for WWE. They grew up a fan. They grew up dreaming of one day wrestling at WrestleMania. WWE is also the biggest promotion in the world. Business is booming for them right now. They want to make money. So any opportunity for them to find an easier pathway there, for them, it's a great thing. And it's smart business on WWE's part to partner with these schools, not only because it gets them in at the ground level when it comes to these prospects, but it's like having mini NXTs in different places throughout the country without the expense of building more performance centers, which cost millions and millions of dollars and have to be staffed. This is their way around that. You know, in some ways, it's very much like the idea that I pitched years ago for them to create their own little territory system, partnering with existing schools. I mentioned Lance Storm at the time. I don't think he's doing his academy anymore, but he was at the time that I talked about this, and I cited him as one example. Why not partner with somebody like Lance Storm and his school? And you'll have a presence up there in Canada, and then one here and one there. It's very much the same concept. Remember Billy Corgan? He said that he was bringing back the territories for the NWA, where they would collaborate with different promotions and give them the NWA affiliate designation, and they would give them access to NWA talent. Just this morning, actually, they announced a new partner in WLW, which is Harley Race's old promotion. The thing is, the NWA name, it doesn't mean anything like what it used to. But collaboration is fine. Collaboration is a good thing. We're seeing it now with NXT and TNA. AEW collaborates with New Japan and with CMLL. I think collaboration is a great thing, but this is more than just collaboration, and that's where the other side of this comes in, where some people, like those independent promoters that Mike mentioned, are worried about where this leads, and I think for good reason. I worry that we may end up with fewer talents who might otherwise have worked television in other places before WWE. Or maybe they would have gone to Japan, maybe they would have gone to Europe, or Mexico, or other places, learning the different styles and making a name for themselves, who, now that they're being targeted at such a young age by WWE, they might not go down that path. They may just see a straight line to WWE, and that's it. This was always the concern when Triple H announced his plan for global domination years ago for NXT. He was going to have other NXTs set up in other countries. We're going to get NXT Japan. We're going to get NXT Mexico. We're going to get NXT here and there. Are we going to lose out now on the next CM Punk? Where does the next Bryan Danielson come from? Or Walter? Or Will Ospreay, who cut their teeth on the indie scene working all different places because it wasn't just about going straight to WWE. That's a concern. I mentioned NXT UK before, right? Look at how that turned out. Originally, it was just going on hiatus. They were preparing to launch this thing called NXT Europe. We're still waiting for NXT Europe to become a thing. In the meantime, they gutted the UK roster, and they picked out a few names they wanted to keep. I mean, it wasn't a hiatus, and then people knew it wasn't just a hiatus. It was a permanent hiatus. But the NXT UK brand was not a positive for the UK indie scene. And I will also say the UK indie scene was also a fucking cesspool, as we found out. And a lot of the damage was self-inflicted. You can't lay that all at the feet of WWE. But what did they do? They came in, they raided all of the good talent, and limited a lot of the other places then that they could work. Because now we have them under contract, and they have control over where you can and can't work. So when WWE gets involved, like if you're an indie promoter, you can understand why they might get a little clammy, why they might get that lump in their throat. Yeah, right now we're not talking about independent promotions, but that doesn't mean that eventually it doesn't lead down that road. They can just see an army of WWE recruits coming in and saying, oh, I can't lose. I'm a WWE ID guy. Look, I got my badge. Sorry. Believe me, that's bad enough as it is on the indie scene. It already happens. Now you're going to have an army of people even younger who think, oh, I can't lose. WWE's got their eye on me. You got to make me look good. But right now, we're not talking about indie promotions. We're talking about training schools so far. Who knows where this may lead. For now, it sounds like a positive thing. WWE can only recruit so many NIL talents. A lot of them are never going to sign with WWE. A lot of them are never going to pan out. Like on TNT the other night, I mentioned the Cavender twins. Right? I think we saw them once on TV. Because the way the NIL program works, it's not like they're not signing you and now you're a WWE talent, right? They're basically, it's like they're putting their stamp on you and saying, okay, we're going to provide you with access to our training facility and, all of these opportunities. And then maybe if you want to, if you want to do this, you'll sign with us, right? That's the whole point of the program. You're going to have a lot of people in that NIL program and in those classes who are never going to make it. I compare it to other minor leagues and other sports. The minor league system in baseball. Do you know how many of those minor league players ultimately make it to the major leagues? Very few. Very, very few. They need independent talent. It can't just be relying on NIL recruits, collegiate athletes. It's got to be a mix of both. You look at the men's scene right now on NXT, it is bleak. Especially when you compare it to the women's division. It is night and day. But there are still questions that need to be answered. How restrictive are these ID designations? If they get an offer from another promotion, let's say somebody is a WWE ID talent, but they get an offer from AEW and they want to take it. Does WWE have the right of first refusal? They have the right to match it, even if that person has already decided, I don't want to go to WWE. I want to go to AEW. Right? If WWE wants them, the talent may not have a say in the matter. If you are tied to WWE in some way, this billion-dollar company, at that point, can you truly call yourself independent? The financial aspect mentioned in the press release, what does that mean? They didn't explain what that means. Are they paying anything to the schools, or is it the talent themselves? I'm sure we'll find out soon enough. For WWE, though, it's a no-brainer. And for the talent, look, nobody is saying they have to go to WWE. But they obviously do things a certain way, and you'll eventually have to adapt to their way of doing things if you ever want to work there. And maybe the ID designation gets them paid more when they work indie dates. Kind of like how when a legend gets inducted into their Hall of Fame, they get to promote themselves at conventions and meet and greets as a WWE Hall of Famer, and they probably get to charge more. Depending on the different stakeholders involved, there are pros and cons to this, and there are still questions that need to be answered.